Memories of Creature 88. A story by user RegalLegalEagle. Chapter 7. Noise Complaint. This was an entirely new experience for Vincent. He was sitting at the back of a Yervish commando briefing room in a mobile command post near the suspected Black Blood manufactory. He'd planned on getting geared up in the ship armory, but they'd sent him down here first to see the plan. They were down on level 64. Somewhere approaching the surface, and he was watching the senior overall commander, such original names, give the presentation on their target. Someone had tipped off patrols about more serious than usual drug activity in the region, which was odd since crime rates in the general area were actually down, so patrols hadn't swept in months. To Vincent, that meant someone was suppressing gangs to try and keep the attention off of them. But the commander's opinion was the locals were too stoned out of their minds to commit any crimes. This entire fabrication unit used to be a pharmaceuticals manufactory. The machinery was all supposed to be decommissioned and removed, but there's a chance some was missed, or that the felons are simply using the super construction of the facilities themselves, which were left unchanged. We have recon reports that place large numbers of potential scouts all around the area. So once we move in, we're going to have to move in fast and hard. Hierarchy has cleared this entire level as a red zone. If they look like felons, do not take chances. Put them down hard. We've been cleared for full mil-spec loadouts. Vincent glanced around and noticed the various Yervish nodding at the information. No one asked about potential civilians in the area or rules of engagement. Was that a thing for them? He was honestly the worst person to ask, since his own style of patrolling generally led to heavy-handed use of force and violence, but he'd never imagined a full commando unit being ordered to more or less assault a level of the city as if it were hostile territory. Key points of entry are marked as such. There are 4 landing pads that not only appear to be in good shape, but show signs of use, meaning the felons could possibly have technical-grade fighting craft to use against us. There will be mil-spec gunships in AO, who've been given clearance to destroy any authorized craft in the area, but so far we haven't seen any. Once your assault craft lands on the designated pad, each team has a separate entry point. Alpha and Bravo will be taking the first floor. The map of the building behind him lit up, showing colored arrows flowing through the blueprints. Vincent noted the various Yervish clustered together who were nodding, a few jotting down notes. Alpha will secure this main entry flow area and hold positions to catch stragglers. Bravo will begin a clear and kill ascent through the structure. Vincent's eyebrows arched at the news. It really seemed like they were indeed approaching this like a full-on military assault. This wasn't going to be the usual patrollers. These were killers. He glanced around at his kin and wished Yervish had more personality. Charlie and Delta will start on levels 4 and 6 respectively. They're tasked with a clear and kill descent until they meet with Bravo. From there, senior team leaders will receive further orders. Of course, we don't have solid information on the current state of the inside of the structure. This is where the shade comes in. Vincent arched a brow. This should be good. The commander pointed back at the map of the building as the various arrows vanished, and instead a lone dot moved up the single path leading into the structure from the next level over. The shade will be sent in ahead of the main assault, to gather as much intel as he can in real time before he's killed. That way, when you move in afterwards, you'll have as much information about the felons as possible. Plus, he should draw focus to the front of the structure, and the ground floor, which will leave them unprepared for our teams to hit the landing pads. Plus, he'll take down some of the felons before his inevitable demise, since we'll be outfitting him with a heavy-duty explosive vest. The commander said all this in the same deadpan monotone as if talking about technical specs for a new printer. You can all go fuck yourselves. The entire briefing room went quiet as the Yervish turned in their seats to look up behind them, at Vincent sitting in the back top, and the commander set his mouth and gripped his briefing folder. Vincent was flipping them all off with both hands. I'm not sure if this means the same in your culture, but in mine this gesture is meant to signify that you can all fuck off. Creature 88. The commander started with a growl. My name is Vincent, motherfucker. I'm a fucking person. You just gave a briefing in which you very calmly talked about me being a fucking suicide bomber in order to get you some intel, hoping I go down in a blaze of weapons fire. Change of plans. I'm not going to be wearing the standard explosive vest, but I'll use my own loadout, thank you. By this point he had stood up and was walking down the steps past the commandos. If I go in heavy like that, they'll know an assault team is sure to come. So instead, I'm going to do it my way. If I die, you can attack, or maybe if I call you, that'll be good too. The intel I was bringing down made it clear someone wants to kill patrol, so I bet they're praying for you guys to go in heavy like this." He shook his head as he walked past the commander, and out of the briefing room towards the armory. "Creature 88, I have not dismissed the briefing." "Fuck off. Take it up with my handler, I don't report to you." This was perhaps the first time Vincent was glad to have a level of bureaucracy between him and most Yervish. He walked through the hall and into the armory before he pulled on an assault harness, quickly deactivating and pulling out the explosive lining, which he replaced with basic patrol harness padding. This had to look like he was on patrol, but he'd need the gadgets the assault harness boasted. He knew that was against all sorts of regulations that demanded explosive linings and assault harnesses to make sure felons didn't get a hold of mil-spec gadgets, but he was done caring about shit like that. He looked at the rows of large, powerful rifles and wished he could take one, but knew that sure as hell wouldn't look like a patrol weapon loadout to experienced felons. So instead, he loaded up 2 queers like before, strapping them to the back of his harness, and took a couple of the commando's knives since his were all back in the apartment. Finally, he grabbed up a large selection of zip ties and cuffs since he had no idea what size Xenos he might be trying to arrest in a minute. He was walking out of the command center and setting his mask into place when he heard Cavazor come in over the comm.
"I have an annoyed senior overall commander communicating with me at the moment. What's going on down there?"
"The jackass just thinks I'm a walking bomb, with one purpose. They're going about this all wrong. I'm ignoring his plan and going to take a different approach."
Could you take some of the extra surveillance gear?"
"Then they'd know something was up. I'm going to try this my way. If I die, I'll still give as much intel as I can beforehand. Fight this guy, Cavazor. Kick it as far up the chain of command as you can. Stall however you can, and we should save some commando lives."
I'll see what I can do."
Vincent was walking out of the mobile command post that they'd set up a few levels above and sectors away from the target structure. Outside, he noticed a few idle patrol squads. These were mostly veterans from the look of it, probably brought in just for crowd control and to watch the surrounding sectors. "You," Vincent pointed to a senior team leader. "Command wants you to take 2 other teams and set up some toilets around the path leading to the target structure." The Yervish turned to look at him and sighed out. He looked familiar, but Vincent saw plenty of Yervish every day. "Oh, it's you. Trying to be a negotiator again?" "Ah, the hostages from his patrol. The term you're looking for isn't toilet. It's low-visibility flush net. Yeah, whatever, those. I'm going to start driving felons out of the building, and since there's only one footpath, I want you to set up some of those in the neighborhoods around that point. Out of sight, but in position to grab those running from me." The Yervish shrugged. "Fine." Vincent was about to start tossing around insults and vague threats to get the Yervish to do his job when he paused. He hadn't been expecting agreement. It generally took him 3 sets of orders written in different colors to get them to do anything. "I was on the scene in the club after you took out those 2 in the restaurant. I never realized you get so injured. Dead, yes, but..." The Yervish shrugged. "I appreciate your work, Shade." The senior team leader nodded and moved to start rounding up his team, leaving Vincent to make a few confused faces as he tried to process having a Yervish treat him like a person. Finally, he shook his head and walked out of the area to find a lift to take him down to the level he wanted. Once inside, he looked around and felt a little relieved that he didn't see any more of that strange graffiti. But when the lift stopped and the door opened, he looked out at what looked to be a painted fireball on the side of a hab, and within it were the words, "The city shall be burned clean of sin." "God damn it," he muttered, and made note to start asking around the normal patrols to see if anyone had taken note of who was spreading this stuff around. Graffiti duty was very low-level stuff, so he doubted most patrols gave a shit. Maybe he'd check with maintenance. He shook his head and moved on then, noticing that the streets here had a bare minimum of foot traffic. There were usually always people moving around going somewhere. They were so far deep down in the sun hadn't shone on these buildings in decades, or maybe a century, so it wasn't like the darkness stopped people from going about their days. But here he only saw a few Xenos, and they were always moving quickly. Not quite jogging, but certainly in a hurry. There were also more scorch marks and various stains around the streets, which made him think that there had been fighting in the area a while back. Maintenance never bothered with cleanup this far down. They'd just stick to making sure the supports were strong and the whole sector didn't collapse. He really needed to get in contact with maintenance, not just to ask about the graffiti, but to set up some sort of reporting system so they could note increased signs of fighting. If the patrols knew where the felons were fighting, they could keep an eye on it. Then he saw the walkway leading out across the bridge to the large pharmaceutical building that was the target. There were 2 Roviks standing guard out front, but it didn't look like he was expected. While he was far enough away that they wouldn't simply notice, he pulled a stun beetle from his harness and then dipped one of his knives in a small pouch of knockout serum on his belt. When they'd first explained to him a non-lethal technique that involved stabbing someone to sleep, he was rather dubious. But Roviks took a lot to be brought down by a knife, and they had more than enough excess flesh. Then he tucked his knife back into his arm sleeve and held the beetle in his palm, hand down, so they wouldn't notice it. The Roviks eyed him cautiously as he approached, and with the hand not holding the beetle, he held up his badge. "Hey, this building is condemned. Clear out of here." The 2 looked from him and then up, back down the path as if waiting for someone else. "Hey, down here, you 2 chucklefucks." He reached up and slapped one of them with his badge, which made the much larger creature flinch and back up in surprise. "I said that building is condemned. Clear out. Are you looking for some friends?" He glanced over his shoulder.
No, but shouldn't you be?"
one said, obviously very confused that Vincent was here alone. "Why? All I'm doing is clearing out vagrants. Get moving." He jerked a thumb back down the path as he clipped his badge to his belt again. They looked between each other and then Vincent before one of the 4-armed beasts pulled an older-looking comm unit from his own vest.
"Let me just ask."
But Vincent tossed the beetle then onto the Rovik's chest, the black creature firmly biting the Rovik in the chest as a wave of electricity coursed out of it. The Rovik cried in pain and then dropped to the ground unconscious. The other lunged forward, 2 massive fists arcing out towards Vincent. But he was prepared for such an obvious attack and ducked under it, pulling his knife free and jabbing it into the Rovik's outstretched arms. The creature howled and pulled back, starting to lash out with all 4 hands now. But Vincent could easily slip away and duck beneath the careless attacks, focusing on cutting and stabbing those outstretched arms. Their thick skin ensured the cuts were all minor, but he noticed the felon slowing down. The serum was finally kicking in as it staggered forward, and then collapsed. With both of them down, Vincent picked up the old comm, holding it up as his mask analyzed it and found the broadcasting frequency. So far nothing was being sent, which meant they didn't know he was here. Stepping over the bodies of the sleeping Roviks, he pulled his magnum free with one hand and walked up to the main door. He pressed on the large metal door, but it didn't budge. Then, glancing around, he noticed a smaller opening to the side. This one was open, and he stepped inside. The main lobby had one of those corporate statue things that he never understood, back on Earth or here in the city. There were 3 levels he could see, and a whole mess of felons. There were chairs, couches, crates, males, females, booze, lights, music, and smoke from cooking. This was a whole camp, really. So he lifted his magnum into the air and fired off a round, which made most of them gasp or cry in surprise and fear. But he had their attention very quickly. "Attention, vagrants! This building is fucking condemned! Get the fuck out!" Most were staring at him in surprise, and he noticed a few were looking around the area as if trying to see where the other patrol were. "What the hell are you standing around for? Get your asses moving!"
"Shouldn't there be more of you?"
asked one of those howler monkey Zenos he'd seen before. "Sorry, there's only one of me. I was born unique."
"I mean, more patrol?"
"For what? Clearing some shitbags out of an old building? Don't fucking flatter yourself." The Zeno was obviously confused. They'd been expecting a big attack then. He didn't see many weapons, but there were an awful lot of crates scattered through the lobby.
"We aren't leaving."
The howler stood tall, a good half-meter above Vincent, and crossed his arms.
"You'll have to make us."
"Fine." Vincent stepped forward and kicked the howler right between the legs as hard as he could. There was half a second of shock on the monkey's face before he crumpled to the ground and puked. Good to know their anatomy was similar. When Vincent saw a Vernic on the second level moving for a crate, he shot the box, making everyone jump and the Vernic stop. "You had your chance to get your things. None of that. Get out. Out, out, out. He then pulled 2 discs from his harness, activating them as a sound his shitty ears couldn't pick up began to emit. The Xenos in the building began to gasp and cry, clutching at their ears as he tossed 1 disc up to the 2nd level on his left and the other to the right. This finally got the felons moving as they began to scurry down and out of the building to escape the noise. He saw a Rovik rushing toward him from the side with a tie-bar cannon in 2 of his hands. But Vincent just shot him clean through the head, stepping aside as the body slid across the floor. "And don't fucking fight me! I'm just getting your sorry asses out of this building," he called out. But it might be lost on the Xenos rushing for the door. Even the howler he'd kicked was crawling for the door at this point. If everything was going according to plan, then they'd be rushing across the bridge only to get scooped up by the waiting patrols. Vincent calmly replaced the 2 rounds he'd used in his Magnum as he finally heard something over his comm that was being picked up on the felon frequency. "What's all that noise from downstairs?" "Sir, the Shade is here." "Excellent. Then the attack has begun?" I don't know." "What do you mean?" "He just keeps telling people the building is condemned and is ordering us to leave. He isn't even arresting people." There was a pause after a second. "What?" "I think he's just convinced we're vagrants." "The fucking Shade ruins everything. I was sure they'd have followed up on the tip." "Should I arm the explosives on the landing pads?" "No, you know how unstable the explosives are. If this is just the Shade being a pain, I don't want to risk losing the landing pads. Go kill him." "Should we let him find the Black Blood facility?" "No, just fucking kill him. I'm not going to bother packing that all up until they send commandos to raid the building so we can kill them in the explosion." "Yes, sir. He just has a patrol harness, so this should be simple." "Get it done." Vincent looked up at the ceiling. His mask had figured out one end of the call was coming from the top of the building, while the other was on his level, but at the back of the building, behind the lobby and away from the noise. Vincent quickly tapped into his own comm. "Handler."
Don't broadcast near those emitters."
"Oh, sorry, forgot." He quickly jogged through the lobby into the rooms behind it, finding an old locker room. "This better?"
"Much."
"They have explosives on the landing pads. If the commandos come, they can't use those."
"Understood."
"They planned this. They wanted us to attack. I'm going to see what I can find out, but don't send anyone in unless I call or die."
"Understood, Creature 88. Good hunting."
He was about to step out of the locker room when he saw a Vernic walk past the entrance clutching a blaster Vincent didn't recognize. Vincent quickly slipped next to the entrance, Magnum in hand. There were 2 other Vernics behind the first one he'd seen. They were waiting around the door leading to the lobby. "I still hear the noise. Is he gone?" "How can he stand it? It's so awful." "I don't know. Maybe the Shade feeds on the discomfort?" "Nah, I just can't hear it." They all looked back at him as he stepped out of the locker room, punching the nearest Vernic in the face, shooting another in the chest, and firmly kicking the one up front, through the door and into the lobby. Once the felon hit the ground, he dropped the weapon and shrieked, clutching his head before Vincent grabbed a leg and dragged him back through the doors away from the sound. "Why are you vagrants fighting me for a shitty old building?" "What? You don't know?" "Tell him nothing!" shrieked another voice, and he looked down the hall to see 2 howlers with Talon rifles aiming at him. He dove forward through the doors as they began to fire, the energy bolt slamming into the doors as they swung shut. They weren't willing to follow him into the lobby, though, and he quickly pulled out another disc, activating it and tossing it into the center of the lobby, hoping that would help make the sound louder. "Sir, he has no idea what's in the building. He was just trying to interrogate one of our men." "This fucking Shade. Of course he just stumbles across our operation." "Should we let him retreat?" "No, I fucking told you. Kill him. Kill him dead. Activate the jammer so he can't call for help." "But then our own comms will go down." "I fucking know that, you pissant." Well, that would be it for listening in on their calls, but it also meant they wouldn't be able to coordinate, which worked fine for him. He began to open crates around the lobby at random, just to check, and indeed found large caches of blasters. Tie-bar cannons, some queers, all manner of weapons. They were certainly well equipped for felons, but it was time to start heading up. He glanced at the ceiling once more, knowing he had several floors to get through, and who knows how many felons. Replacing the Seagull round he'd used in his Magnum, he clicked the cylinder shut and smiled. This was turning out to be a very interesting outing. He looked around the lobby for a moment, to try and figure out his next course of action. The Howlers had Talon rifles, which was bad, but he didn't know how many he had to deal with. It also appeared that despite Big Bad Boss's orders, they weren't coming back into the lobby with his noisemakers going. Reaching up, he pressed a button on the side of his mask and had to blink a bit as his vision changed. Or, rather, what he was seeing through the mask changed as he looked around the lobby in heat vision. It was a bit disorienting, but he'd gotten used to it after a while. He could see bodies on the other side of all the doors on the main floor. Didn't they know how bad for their health that could be? He walked up to one of the doors that led to a stairwell in the back, slapping what looked like a small card deck to the door. He could see the figures on the other side raise their weapons, waiting for him. But instead, he backed up and activated the charge. The shaped charge exploded, punching a small hole in the door, and then bathing the figures behind it in fire. He had to turn away and switch off of heat vision for a moment, seeing everything normally as he stepped through the door while the Xenos still alive screamed in pain. He quickly put around in the howler that was trying to slap the fire out of his fur to no avail, and pulled out his knife to quickly end the Vernic on the ground that was too far gone to be helped, and was just suffering. Once he was past them, he reached up to turn the heat vision back on, and looked above him as he walked into the stairwell. He saw figures moving around, but they hadn't figured out where he'd gone. So far, so good, he figured, and began to climb the stairs, glancing around the hallways outside the stairs to see if anything came up on the heat vision. He had no idea how the black blood was made, but it had to involve heat of some kind. Then he saw it on level 5, a massive section of heat near the center of the floor. It seemed like some sort of large room that was generating all the heat and bathing everything else around it, so the contrast wasn't very effective for his mask. He turned the heat vision off and returned to normal vision as he slipped through a door to take him closer to the heat blob he'd spotted. The halls around here were empty, and it seemed like they'd made the mistake of sending everyone down to surround the lobby. While the felons were well equipped, and obviously prepared for some big fight with the commandos, they weren't actually all that well trained. It was something he'd have to point out to his superiors. Slowly walking through the corridor, he kept alert for any stray guards he hadn't noticed on the heat vision, but no one challenged him. He finally found a door marked Central Lab and quietly opened it to slip through. Inside, he noticed the significantly higher temperature and glanced around at a multitude of various lab equipment. There were large vats of a reddish-black liquid that was going through some sort of heating chamber. He heard movement and quickly tucked himself into a corner to try and see if he could learn anything.
We really need to move this operation soon if the patrol are on to us. I don't see the point in staying here as bait. They'll still raid the building, won't they? You get the chaos you desire, but if we don't start dismantling this equipment, it'll all be lost.
He could see some small rodent-like Xeno with a white lab coat on. It had surprisingly large eyes and a long tail that overall made him think of a mouse character from some children's book or movie. It was only about as tall as his chest, which helped the image. What didn't help was what looked like bloodstains all over the otherwise white lab coat. Following after the mouse was another Rovik. This one had plenty of scars crisscrossing his face and arms, and likely even more beneath the synth suit it was wearing. It looked mil-spec. We want them to think this operation is purely about the black blood until it's too late. If we moved our gear out, they'd suspect something, or they'd simply send a smaller team. We want the biggest response they've got.
That Shade is here, you know. There's a chance he'll find us first. I can't help the operation if I'm dead.
It's one creature against my entire team. Do you think it's easy keeping all those grunts in line? I'm not scared of a pathetic little soft skin. It's the size of a Vernic. When have you ever seen a Vernic beat anyone bigger than it?
Not everything small is powerless. The mouse obviously wasn't impressed by the Rovik despite being small enough that the large Xeno could easily crush it underfoot.
Spare me,
the Rovik snorted out.
Now why did you bring me down here?
The mouse nodded and waved for the other Xeno to follow him over to what looked like a large fridge. The area around it was surprisingly warm.
This equipment isn't very efficient. It generates large amounts of heat trying to keep the subject cold. I'm starting to see deterioration where there shouldn't be any.
It pressed a few buttons and the door opened up. From his hiding spot, Vincent nearly gasped out loud as the door swung wide. Inside was a body. A human body. It was Brian, from the memory. Yet, he looked, and the body had both hands. There were all manner of tubes and wires running in and out as he noticed blood flowing from the sides of the fridge down into some lab gear.
See? This is one of the creatures similar to the Shade. Does that look impressive compared to me?
The Rovik prodded the body with a hand, and it didn't react. Please, don't tamper with the husk. If you'll notice the vein discoloration, the skin of this creature is dark brown, but the veins are starting to appear through the flesh. That shouldn't be happening.
Is it slowing production?
No. I'm unsure if this is a result of being a husk body without a soul, or simply a side effect of the treatments to increase blood creation. The Rovik waved a hand dismissively.
What do I care?
Quality of all products has diminished since the original was lost. Whatever supplements our benefactors were sending kept this sort of thing from happening. I'm concerned that this is somehow tainting our product. The Rovik laughed out at that.
You aren't a chemist for the Union anymore. We're selling this shit to junkies and lowlifes. What do I care?
The test subjects you gave me, well, before their termination, they were experiencing strange hallucinations. They spoke of visions that sound apocalyptic.
The ravings of drugged-up lunatics.
Except they all shared themes. I kept them separated, and they were still speaking about flames and shadows, sins, something called a phoenix, a shared hallucination. This shouldn't be possible. It's as if the blood is somehow transmitting memories. The mouse was rubbing his chin as he looked up at the body. If you do get the body of the Shade, please don't destroy it. I'd love to examine it. Well, now you've got your chance. Vincent figured he'd heard enough and stepped forward from behind the machines. The two figures turned and he saw the Rovik pulling some massive curved sword from his belt, but Vincent shot him in the head. The Zeno's head jerked back as a chunk of skull went flying, but then he growled and started to lunge forward. Fuck, you're a tough one. Vincent put another slug in the Rovik's face, and this time it went down hard. The mouse turned to run, but he stomped on the creature's tail, hearing it squeal in pain as it was held in place. Vincent pulled him back and then zip-tied the chemist to the leg of one of the lab machines. Please don't hurt me. I'll tell you whatever you want. I work with these thugs out of duress. That's fascinating, and you're going to tell me plenty, but I need you to do something first. He walked back to the door into the lab and looked back. Is this the only entry? That and one on the other side. He gestured with his free hand. Vincent pulled what looked like a massive pill from his harness, crushing it in the middle and tossing it through the door. There was a shoom as foam suddenly expanded and hardened in the hallway outside, solidifying into a material about as tough as concrete that would hold off any felons. He walked over to the other entrance and repeated the procedure before walking back to the mouse. You sure it's just those two? Unless you can fit through air vents, yes. Vincent glanced up and noticed the vents had openings about a half-meter across, so they weren't an issue. All right, wait here. He opened his mouth as he pressed the barrel of the magnum inside, but the creature squeaked and waved his hand. Don't! Vincent removed the barrel from his mouth. I'll come back. No, the signal jammer is still active. I know, that's why I'm going to kill myself, so they'll notice my death and move in. If your death signal uses comm frequencies, that'll be blocked too. Oh, right. It's that black box over there. He pointed over Vincent's shoulder at a device on a table that looked like a stereo. He pressed a bright white button and the lights on it flickered and died. He tapped his comm. Handler?
Reading you, Creature 88.
Send in the commandos. The felons are heavily armed and prepared for a fight. They're positioned around the lobby on the main floor, but the landing pads might be rigged to explode, so see if they can be dropped on the roof. I killed their boss and have captured their main chemist. I've blocked myself off in the Black Blood lab.
Understood, Creature 88. Good work.
He nodded and turned off the comm. Then he looked around, and failing to see a chair, sat on the corpse of the Rovik boss as he faced the mouse. All right, we're going to have a nice little conversation now. The mouse gulped, and Vincent smiled. All right, everybody, you have a great day, and I will see you all in the next one. I would love it if you could go down into the description and click on the link for Memories of Creature 88. It's a fantastic series. RegalLegalEagle did a great job. And if you want to also click on the Patreon link to support me, that would be fantastic as well. I appreciate you guys giving a thumbs up and commenting and all of the things that the algorithm likes. I will try to do other things that the algorithm likes, like put content out more frequently, like, twice a week or something like that. I'm doing my best. I did just get a promotion That's what I was working towards for a while now, and so now that that's over with, hopefully I can get back to doing some more readings more consistently, and more streams too, guys. Thank you so much. I will talk to you all later in the next one. Bye-bye. I did it! I finished a chapter right before work. I did a good job. I did a good thing.